All right, we'll get started. If somebody, last person in, close the door, I'd appreciate it, please. Thank you so much. The session title today is Simple Ways to Improve Beer Quality, Applying Lean Thinking to Quality Management. My name is David Katleski. I'll moderate today. Paul Guaracini is partner and brewmaster of Sager Beer Works in Rochester, New York. Before going pro, Paul was a longtime homebrewer and worked at Eastman Kodak Company. At Kodak, he was a logistics manager and lean consultant, and is applying those same ideas to his brewery. Paul also serves as a member of the Brewers Association Brew Pub Subcommittee and is a mentor in the association's DEI mentorship program. I'd like to introduce you to Paul. Thank you, Paul.
All right. Thank you, David. You know, if just another comment before I get started, the opening a brewery in Western New York was made infinitely easier by this man here. So I am very grateful. So,
Thank you.
A show of hands for David. Again, he was perseverance and hard work that really opened a lot of doors that, again, makes starting a brewery, at least the legal side of things, much, much easier.
Appreciate that. I guess I'll be doing the presentation today.
Okay, well, let's get started. So, simple ways to improve brewing quality, applying lean thinking. Skills. Oh, this way. Just a little more about Sager Beer Works. As David said, we're in Rochester, New York, western part of the state. We have a small 5-barrel brew pub. You can see my equipment here, and we have a nice little cozy tap room with a kitchen, and that's my starting point. So very much we're talking very small scale brewing, and for those that heard Ryan's presentation the last hour, that really resonated for me a lot of what he was saying, and but I think I probably might have a few ideas to solve some of those problems that he was noting. All right, quality management. You know, as a brewery owner, as a brewer, it's not why I started the business. You know, I'm into making and selling beer. So quality management, you know, kind of very important. Yes, very, very important, but boring. And so apologies to quality professionals in the room. I look at it as a necessary evil, like bookkeeping, purchasing, things like that. Something you need to do. So from a lean point of view, we're going to look at it as something you're, of course, going to have a lot of focus on, but you're going to be careful about the time and effort that you put in, that you make sure you get something out of it. So lean thinking and the quality tools of lean manufacturing, it's a very simple process, simple techniques, and it really plays well with small-scale breweries with limited resources. All right, it's working good. All right, sorry. So what's lean? Where'd that come from? So lean thinking or lean manufacturing, Lean Six Sigma. It comes from 1960s in Japan, and the Japanese industry was in shambles after the Second World War, and they needed ways to rebuild their industry, and a lot of Americans helped them out. But basically, it centered on the car manufacturing in Japan, namely Toyota, and it certainly helped Toyota become you know, one of the most profitable companies in the world. The general ideas are now applied all over the world in a lot of different industries. The basic idea, though, it's a business operating philosophy, and then of course there's a set of techniques, you know, that go along with it. But it's really big on frugality. You know, again, the Japanese didn't have a lot of money, and a lot of us brewers, we don't have a lot of money either. So, doing things very simply, and frugally, so to speak, if that's a word, is really a big part of it. Continuous waste reduction is another major, major aspect to it. Waste in the lean lexicon is not just material defects, that would be obvious, product defects, but there are other things like inventory. Inventory is considered really bad in the lean world. Wasted time, wasted motion, extra information or unneeded information. We'll talk more about that. Extra movement, transport, and of course, making things you don't need, which we would call overproduction. So we're trying to avoid all those things. We're really trying to drive that in a very specific way. The nice thing about lean thinking, is that it does, it's not just a simple idea. It integrates operations with quality, safety, people management, workplace design, all of those things. And hopefully I'll be able to explain how some of those pieces work, but especially in the quality space. So the wastes of sorts that we're going to talk about today are obviously material defects because we're focused on the quality system, but waiting time and information. And we're definitely going to get into the root causes of all of those things. So that's lean. But what is beer quality, or how can we talk about beer quality? And the very traditional definitions. What does my beer taste like? It is free of bugs. It's the microbiological aspect. Everybody can relate to that, I'm sure. And also, is the beer stable? Beer ages. So how does it age, et cetera? We're trying to understand that, trying to avoid that, et cetera. But less common definitions, maybe. Is my beer consistent? And of course, the macro brewers are really, really into this. They want every beer and every plant every day to always taste the same. And so they're very focused on that particular aspect of quality. But at my scale and in my side of the world, there's another definition. Is my beer predictable? Did I make what I said I would make? From the label it says bursting with mango flavor. Does it really taste that way? And how do I make sure it does? Always deliver authenticity in what I call the beers and what they taste like. So we're going to talk more about the process side of things. We're very focused from a quality standpoint on how we do things and improving in that specific aspect. The concept here I want you to think about is that process quality will lead to product quality. So we're very focused on how we make the beer and what goes into that. Now, whenever we talk about quality, we have to mention the customer because ultimately they have the vote. And so, but I want you to remember, just think about that, it's not quality at any cost. I mean, there's a certain level of quality you have to survive in the marketplace. And you want to be maybe a little better than that, but you don't want to be twice that necessarily. That might be, in the lean world, considered a wasteful effort. So you really have to know what your customer needs and wants. It's not just your own personal view. It could be, if you have the money and everything like that. So some of the principles that we're going to apply. We talked about what is lean and what is quality. We'll put those together in this slide. So very important in the lean world is that quality is everyone's responsibility. You want to build your work system so that there are quality steps and responsibilities for everyone. It's not just a staff function that occurs in the quality department or the quality manager things, or the owner or the head brewer, things like that. Everyone plays a role, and you have to build your work system so that reinforces that. So we're going to emphasize process stability. And I mentioned focus on process, but particularly the stability. We'll be driving at simple, cheap things you can do to make your process very, very stable. And in that way, you're going to improve the quality. It may sound like a leap, but it really does work. And we're also going to talk about variation. In the previous session, Brian did mention this a number of times. And so understanding the variation. So you're driving at stability. There's obviously going to be some instability of things from time to time. So why Why does that occur? What are the sources of variation? Understanding that, removing them. There's a whole process there, and that's within the lean concept. So whenever we talk about quality in the lean world, the phrase zero defects always comes up. So it's really, like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You can never get to zero defects, but it's something we're always striving for. And that's embedded in this continuous improvement idea. And I'll show you how we actually put that in practice. Sounds good, continuous improvement. We're always improving. Yeah, okay, but how do you actually do it? And we're going to cover some ways that you can actually achieve that. So the problem at our scale is that we're human. And remember that defects, whether it be process or product related, they come from us screwing up. We make mistakes. Our brewery systems, particularly if you're very small, there's a lot of handwork. This is the problem with handcrafted. The downside of handcrafted is that we got our hands in everything and we don't do things consistently. We make mistakes all the time. And I'm going to drive you to think about how to stop us from being human. That's the bottom line. We have to find cheap, simple ways to keep us from screwing up, affecting the process, which then will affect the beer. So there's this continuous improvement philosophy that's really embedded in lean, and I'll show you how to try to make that happen. Work standards, or we call those standard work. You might call them SOPs. They are the foundation of this. If there's no basis for how you do things and the right way to do things, and you reinforce people doing it, you will not get a stable, predictable result at the end of the day. So it's a very big part of it. Some of you may already have those, but how you use them, how do you use these standards, is really the measure of the really good versus great breweries. There's a process that is called Plan, Do, Check, Act. I'll describe what that is. It's how you actually execute continuous improvement. It's got a funny little phrase, but I'll show you how it works. It's pretty effective. So those are the principles. I mentioned the importance of stability. I'll go through each one of these, but here's just a laundry list of the way I think about process stability, brewing process stability. Smooth the brewing schedule and make every day the same. In my world, I don't brew every day. I'm too small, but so maybe make every week the same is how I look at it. There's some real nice benefits that come from that. Combine that with your work standards. I mentioned that before, creating what we call standard work, which is how you do things. And taking that smoothing idea, that standardizing, to how you work within the day and who does what and when they do it. Bottom line, I'll say more about this, is reducing any chaos. Because chaos causes defects and will affect the brewery at the end of the day, affect the beer at the end of the day. And then there's the Plan, Do, Check process. So the thing I wanted you to think about in terms of Plan, Do, Check, Act at this point, you should look at, again, our mindset is continuous improvement, always being better, always trying to be better. So think about every batch you make is a test. It's an opportunity for you to test the standard work, test your process, test how you do things, how the work is done, to confirm that it's working. It does produce the result you want. And if not, what are you going to do about it? So that's how you drive quality at every level, because everyone knows every batch is a test of sorts. It's a test of your process, a test of your procedures and things like that. You want to think about it that way. Of course, collecting data, part of that process is very key, and we'll get into that. All right, smoothing the brewery schedule. So here's an idea. Let's plan brewing and packaging on a very regular, repeatable cycle. As I said, make every day the same. So the basic idea here is the amount and timing of labor and material needs becomes very smooth and very predictable. And basically, this is going to increase focus, people focus, and will minimize errors. So if everyone knows what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, and you minimize distractions and things like that, there's less likely to make a mistake and not follow the procedures that are given. And they're probably going to be safer. It's not a fire drill, right? Fire drills don't make good beer if that's how your brewery's operating. So there's a safety benefit there. People that are not running around crazy, they're probably going to work safer. And, if, for example, you brew on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays, people can organize their lives, too. They kind of like that kind of schedule. So, again, their mindset is better. They're more into what you're trying to do, and you're going to get a better result. It sounds very squishy, but it really does work. It really does work. What you see here is a little visual board that I create to communicate what's happening. As I said, I don't brew every day. The yellow Post-its are my brew days. It's always on Monday. Why Monday? Because we're not open on Monday, and I can really focus. No deliveries on Monday, and the beer is better when I brew on Monday. So kegging on Tuesday, kegging or cleaning lines every other Wednesday or something like that. So making that and actually executing, actually doing it that way, you're really going to drive a very good structure. And I'll show you in a moment how you drive this structure into each brew day also. I was worried you weren't going to be able to see that, but I guess maybe some of you in front can see it. Anyway, nothing special here in the sense of this is a typical standardized work sequence that I use. So standard work is not detailed work instructions. It's more general. It's designed for someone who knows what the process is, and they need a general guide to remind them. So the words on the left, if you can see that, are just the start of my brew day, the various sorts of steps, nothing very specific. You would probably recognize all of those if you're a brewer. But on the right-hand side, I have what I call helpful hints. And this is where these quality control points come in, where you're putting good quality and safety reminders. Again, we're humans, we're going to make mistakes. You have to kind of really try hard to remind yourself what you're supposed to be doing, when you're supposed to be doing it. And to drive, again, that stability, that predictability that ultimately will end with better beer. So take that smoothing idea and spread it around a little, so to speak, over the brewing day. The basic idea here is to develop a work balance or a ballet between the people, all the brewers, and the equipment. And so your idea here is to organize the human work, particularly, so they're always doing value-adding things in support of the process, but they're not tripping over each other, they're not interfering with each other, and they're not getting in with equipment of sorts. People are not waiting for the equipment to do things, and the equipment's not waiting for the human to go and do things. So imagine you're going to map out the brew day. In this particular example, I have only 1 hour increments, but imagine they were 15-minute increments. It's like NASCAR, pit crew kind of thing. You're really nailing down what's happening on a typical brew day in these increments and who's doing it. Now, what is the equipment doing? That's the second row there is what the equipment would be doing at a particular time, and what are the humans doing? And you're looking for ways to make sure everyone is not totally stressed out, but they're busy doing useful things in every one of these time increments. And they all make sense because they lead to the shortest possible total cycle of your brew day, and it keeps everybody focused. Again, people focus is very important in avoiding errors, and hence the quality. So this is just a simple example of what I have structured. And again, you could create this little map of sorts, but it's like, as you say, practicing with a pit crew, trying to make sure you understand how what's being done, when, and who's doing it. Sorry, I got old eyes here. I got to keep putting on these glasses. So checklists. Amy, at her talk yesterday, mentioned checklists and things. And here's a specific example. What I use in the for my brew day. It's sort of a bit chronological in terms of the brew process per se. But again, these are reminders, so you can look at them and say, well, you still have to look at it, Paul. I mean, so you have to follow it, right? You have to do it, well, which is true. But again, we're looking for simple, cheap ways to keep you from screwing up, and I'll keep coming back to that. And so making this, as for yourselves, as you practice, so to speak, practice your process by actual brewing, you'll come up with the ideas, these are the things I have to make sure we remember to do because we forgot it last time and things like that. So it goes on the checklist. So this was created not in a vacuum, but actually by brewing and screwing up and figuring out how to remind myself of what has to happen and when. And again, these are particularly various checks and things. Yeah, like obvious things like record the pH and set the rake properly, and all sorts of things like that. They're sort of notes to myself that when I didn't do them in the past, there was a not a good result, or not the result I wanted. Let's just say that. Not all sort of steps or per se are done every brew day. As I said, I don't brew every day, so I have a number of quality elements that I do less often, in this case monthly. If you brew often, you would probably, maybe this monthly checklist would be every week. Things like checking the CIP tank concentration, or cleaning the oxygen stone, or various other calibration of thermometers and pH meters and all that stuff. This is garden variety stuff. But again, the point is that you create this checklist, which you are going to check off to make sure you're actually doing it. Some people may want to sign their initials. And if you have multiple people working in your brewery, this would become even more important to ensure that it's the best you can do to ensure this actually done and someone did it and who did it. Oh, there we go. And also create some visual guides, again, trying to keep us from, as I say, making that mistake. So here, the picture on the left is the ball valve that feeds the water into the hydrator, and it's just a simple valve. But I put some little blue tape. We use a lot of blue tape in our place. And I just made a little mark on the perfect setting where the mix of a grain and water going to into the mash tun is just perfect. So, because I was always getting it wrong, and then, we'd run out of water or whatever. So that's how I sort of dealt with it. So I sort of fixed it of sorts. It's not a permanent thing, but you want to, if you put these little changes in place, you really do want to hardwire them some way so they can't possibly go wrong, so you can't screw it up. So picture on the right is a pressure gauge on our fermenter. It's I'm not that tall, and this is kind of tall for fermenter, so I can't really see really closely. Again, bad eyes. I can't see the exact pressure, and our standard process is to carbonate at 8.5 psi. So I have a little mark on there, so I can see from afar exactly whether it's right or not as I'm walking by and doing other things. So real simple things, a bit of blue tape, and a way to execute or make your standard work procedures really easy to follow. I mean, that's a critical thing, particularly if you have other people doing the brewing. All right, plan, do, check, act. So now that we have our standard work and we're trying to follow it, or we have it, what do we do about it? How do we, as some consultants would say, how do we sharpen the saw? How do we make it better all the time? And so we have this cycle. And so when you sort of, it starts, oh, whoa, that finger. It starts over here in the plan step. That's where you have your standards, your SOPs, workflows, and you have them in place. Okay, we're going to use them, and we go and brew. That's the do step. That's where we're using the checklist. We're collecting data. We're actually trying to execute the standard work as it's been written or as we've agreed to follow it. And then a very important step called the check, and this is where we're doing a comparison. Did we get the result? We're comparing the data we collected for the batch for what we expected. This is where your centuries coming in after the fact. You're tasting the beer. Is this the beer I intended to make? et cetera, et cetera. And the last step is, as you can imagine, well, what are we going to do with this? Are we going to make a change? Are we going to make a modification? So again, each brew day, you are going through this cycle. You're going through this cycle every time. Every batch, you're going through this cycle. So you have this opportunity to test, is the process really working for me? Is it delivering that predictable result in a stable way? Just a note at the bottom. So continuous improvement is not quantum leap type of improvements. There's very, very small improvements made many, many, many times. So it's about high frequency, small improvements. You're making a controlled change, a small controlled change each time. So you come around the cycle again, you can see if you had a positive result. It actually did get better. That's how continuous improvement actually works. It's small improvements done very quickly and often. So we mentioned earlier on the principles of understanding variation, so we'll get into that a bit. So as we said, we have processes and they vary, and because they vary, defects get created, and we're gonna look for those defects, identify them, record them, but we're also gonna try to understand the root cause. Where did they come from? What's the source? The human source. What particular source of my process did I make a mistake on? And then, of course, we try to plan a preventative action, something cheap and simple that will fix it, make it better permanently. So imagine studying every process in the brewery and making this map of what goes wrong, why did it happen, and what are we going to do about it? So imagine you sitting down to really walk through all the sources of variation that you might have and try to figure out, do we have, as we would say in Lean, an effective countermeasure for that particular problem? Well, as you know, a lot of sources of variation. Every process varies, right? That's the way beer making is. But just a laundry list of top to bottom of those. And imagine there's a map for each one of these. Okay, it's a little bit of time to put this together. You notice we're not spending any money here. This is real cheap stuff. It takes work and brain time among the brewing team to figure this out, but you will get benefits from it. Here's an example of the mash process map. Again, this is not exhaustive. I mean, there could be certainly more defects, but you see the list there of various things that come along, the thickness, the mash time, et cetera, the pH, something is wrong, right? And but the critical thing is well, why did it happen? You know, where's the root cause? What did I do or not do that caused that to happen? And then how am I going to mitigate that so I don't do it again? And some of the helpful hints that you could think of those might be kind of lame. You're just asking people to work harder or just read the checklist or things like that. But that's really how it works. It's if the standard work is any good, and there's a reason why you didn't get the result because it probably wasn't followed exactly, or maybe there's something wrong with it. You have to plan a change, make a small change, and see how you can improve it. So, I mean, this takes time. It takes time to really identify each one of these and find out how you're going to deal with them. Okay. But well worth the effort when you do it. I haven't mentioned much about the data. I said we're going to collect some data and things like that. A lot of times when you get into a discussion of quality, or you get into a discussion of statistics and people's eyes glaze over and things like that. And statistics are tricky for a lot of the population, should we say? But obviously they have their role, and so. I'm guess my pitch is going to be that you use them appropriately, and that sort of thing. And the last presentation, Ryan was talking about this stack of batch records that he keeps and things like that. I'm going to think about that a little differently here with you. Anyway, key input to the Plan, Do, Check, Act process. Of course, we're collecting data on the when the do step. And we're comparing it against our standard, our work standard in the check step. So we obviously need data to do that. You can imagine the basic objective parameters of every brewing process. You have to have that data: weight, volume, pH, temperature, pressure, well, all those things. You have to collect all those. That's a table stakes and that sort of thing. But I advocate simple but appropriate record keeping. Don't record everything, and you really have to sort out what's useful and what isn't. I mean, measuring the pH to 3 or 4 decimal places probably is wasted. You shouldn't bother to do that. I mean, that kind of level of precision, if you're actually getting it, may not be all that helpful. So you got to be careful about that. Maybe that's not a great example, but anyway. So certainly to collect these, get these objective measurements, you need some tools. And this is where you will spend some money, but not a lot. I mean, so investing in a decent quality instruments is money well worth spent. I'd certainly recommend that. So here's a little picture of some of my favorite quality tools. Again, you probably have all these too. My favorite is the really long temperature probe. I love that. I guys can get right into the center of the mash tun or the center of the tank and really get a true reading of what's going on in there. The temperature probes on the edge are just not accurate enough for getting a true sense of it, at least from my point of view. The other tool I really enjoy is right down here, these three-way timers. And again, it helps me to, like I have one for the mash process, I have another one for the boil. And they're simultaneous timers, so I can set them, and it just makes sure I don't miss the 3 additions or whatever I got to do at each step. I don't have to reset the timer. They just run for the whole process, and very helpful, very helpful. So more on data management. Charting. Again, this is getting the statistical side of things, but I advocate simple data charting. The human eye and the brain is very, very capable of seeing trends. So just taking a data parameter and charting it, you'll be able to see whether which way it's going. You don't have to be a statistician to get something out of it. So I strongly recommend that. But here's something: you don't just collect the data. I want you to do something with it. Otherwise, if you're not doing it, just being in a sheet somewhere in a file, throw it out, forget it. Don't do it. Stop collecting it if you're not going to do something with it. So, right? Time is money, and so don't waste your time doing that. Okay? But you got to know what you're doing, and when you say, I'm not going to collect that anymore. So that's the second point. Combined with your sensory feedback, eventually you do this enough, you really dial in, what data is important, or I shouldn't say that. What the frequency of data collection that's important. And you can maybe back off on collection where the parameter is very, very stable, or where maybe you don't have any adverse effects that you can detect at the customer level. A couple of examples for me, like for example, fermentation curve for our West Coast algae is very, very predictable. I don't know how many batches we made with that. So I don't check the specific gravity every day once the batch is in. I do it, every third day or something like, because I know exactly where it's going to be. It's just unlikely, that it's going to go off, and it just saves time. So don't collect data where you have really solid known stability. Another aspect is, let's see, my carbonation process. It's very, very stable, 8 psi, 33 degrees, 1 hour with a bleed, and I don't have to use my little gadget to measure the volumes. It is just so predictable. Again, I'm almost 95% draft, so my requirements, carbonation requirements, are a little bit wider than say if you were canning or something like that. So I do use that device, just so you know. I do use it when the mobile canner comes, because he needs something a little different, so I have to know what it is. Just an example, if you get to a level of stability, you can back off some of these measures and save some time and get focused on other things that really do require more attention. So the end result, I guess, is data management is a means to an end. Again, the statisticians in the room, sorry, I'm not trying to make a career out of collecting and managing data. I want to use it for something. So I guess my advice is, be careful how much you collect and what you do with it. It can be a waste also. Basically, you're trying to understand, control the process. That's its job, and collect what you need to do that, and analyze it, for that purpose. Oh, and certainly don't forget Century Part, the qualitative side of things. Ultimately the proof is in the glass. Remember I said that the customer ultimately has a big say in your quality picture. So, but there are books, really good ones, written on Century and Century panels and things like that. So you don't have to start with a full-blown panel. You can. It's a very critical part of your PDCA. That's the critical check. So, but again, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be simply an internal tasting among the cadre, so to speak. There are a lot of great tools out there too in developing your skills and even rudimentary sensory. The flavor map and the flavor wheel and things like that. And if you're just doing a go no go, should I sell this batch? What you're looking for is a lot simpler, but don't skip it. Don't skip it because I don't have time or whatever. You really should do it. You got sort of tying the loop on this batch. I mean, what did it actually taste like? So I don't know. Maybe that's obvious, but sometimes you forget as you get to push it out because it's there's an open tap or whatever. You forget to actually evaluate it. Seriously evaluate. Another thing I find, maybe some of you too, is the sensory. I find I get more out of the sensory we do internally by doing it multiple times. The day it's kegged, and then a few days later, then again, because we sometimes a different impression coming out of the tank versus as it tastes, smells, looks right off the tap. I mean, it's virtually identical, but somehow you get a different impression, different times of the day when you're tasting it. And that sort of thing, you may think about it differently. So we don't write up our notes until we've had it a few times, and we really get a sense. We think we know, what this beer is all about. I'm doing good in time here. So conclusions, as I said, quality management is not the most fun thing, unless you're, I guess, a quality professional. But it's very important, very critically important. And Lean has a number of these tools and techniques to drive your process to be very stable and predictable, and that really does have that downstream effect on helping your brewery. So you want to think about some of these techniques as very foundational and establish a really solid base of standards and managing to standards and driving for stability. Because someday when you get big and you can afford, more analytical techniques and tools and things like that, you'll be really, really well positioned. So certainly when you get beyond, like for us, the draft and the tap room, and you get into a more packaging type environment, you're definitely going to have to up your game, and you'll have to be ready for that with again, a solid foundation like I'm describing, and then a lab and a full quality team and things like that. So you really, really need to do that. All right, that's the end of my story. So we'll have some questions, of course. Here's my email. And if you want to see what this looks like in operation, come visit me in Rochester. Be glad to host you guys. And some other resources. And Amy in her talk referenced these, and these are really good books that the National BA has put together. Mary Pelletieri, her book on quality management, does cover a bit of this lean idea, and it's really, really well written. Same as the other two. So Merritt Waldron is Quality Lab. Once you get into building a lab and those tools to do that, that's a really good book. And if when you get to finally creating a serious sensory program, Pat Fahey's book is excellent. If you're If you're a National BA member, they have this thing called the Resource Hub. They're really great resources. So a lot of really cool stuff out there on the analytical side. So when you get ready for that. So okay, so let's take some questions. And what do you got? right, other questions?
This one to your left.
Like for your schedule, like you had it on the site, you do have others. Do you have kind of like, we obviously rely on a lot of work first. So say one thing is one day behind, do you have any advice for fixing the rest of the schedule?
Fix it so your scheduling process also. So in my brewery, for ale, it's a 2-week cycle, and I stick to that cycle. Absolutely run Monday, so I know 14 days later, I'm just that. I mean, I don't get rid of that, 14 days. Try to keep it extremely rigorous. So I'm not reacting to what's called noise of sorts. Oh, you've done what's going in and about. I mean, you've got to guide your process so it fits the schedule you want to have. You're not slaves to it. You have to work on it. But most of the beers we make were done in 14 days for us. Lots of months. Yeah, you can, I mean, so that making every week the same, making every day the same, that doesn't happen by falling off the wall. You really have to work at it. Okay, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. We set up our process up in the flow and the scheduling process so it actually works out. And then you get all the benefits of doing that. Okay, so I use helping me to scheduling cycle. I let the sales really drive what I need to have. I plan to brew every Monday, but what I brew is we'll have to see on Friday, Sunday.
In closing, and we're about up with time now. But in closing, and I would make a recommendation because Paul did put emphasis on some checklists, right? And checklists are very important. There was a book written called The Checklist Manifesto. I don't know if any of you have read The Checklist Manifesto. It was by a surgeon that wanted to increase his efficiencies during surgery, and it was implemented across the U.S. in pretty much every major medical center. We implemented it at our breweries, and I made all of my managers read it. It's on paperback. I highly recommend it. If you don't implement checklists, this would be a good tool for you to kind of, get a kickstart on how to do that. But they're very important, especially in the brewing process. I'd like to thank Paul for doing this presentation.
Speaking of documents and things, so if you email me, I'll not only send you the presentation, but the spreadsheets or checklists that were behind the full, the full list, the full picture of it. So you probably get more out of that than my little screenshots.
Thank you again.
Sure.